Jacob, I start school tomorrow. This is pretty weird. Felt like just yesterday I was sitting on my couch doing absolutely nothing for pretty much 2 months straight while on break.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I don't start school until Wednesday.
Oh, I actually already have some homework assignments. I've had to do quite a bit of reading already.
How do you have homework before the semester starts?
I honestly have no idea. I mean, it's my legal world of business class, an introduction to that. And already I gotta say it's pretty interesting. What kind of classes do you have starting here on Wednesday?
Mostly all comp sci classes.
That's nice. I have legal world of business, intro to financial accounting, macroeconomics, and calculus. Calculus is going to be that big killer there. So what's your schedule looking like?
I'm pretty sure I don't have to get up until 9 a.m. I haven't looked at my schedule for a month or so I'm going to probably take a look at that tomorrow. I still have yet to turn in my textbooks from last semester, so I'm going to have a lovely $50 late fee.
Yeah, I just got all mine online, and it's kind of annoying, to say the least. A lot of my classes have went to this online hybrid, where a majority of the time I will be at things like over Zoom and online, and they're making me buy these $100 text, e-textbooks that helps me get a course where they do the homework on this other platform than the platform that they give us. So I'm pretty much scrambling all around just to keep everything in order.
Yeah, I've dealt with that some before. I think the worst was chemistry. It was this... What was the name of that? Software? I can't remember. Oh, Alex, Aleks. I thought it was trash. I hated it.
Was it a virtual lab type of thing, or was it...
No, that was a different thing. That was just... She had us do all of our homework through this thing called Alex. She never gave us her own homework.
That's...
Not really.
Yeah, I mean, she probably just bought a course online and gets to teach it, getting a salary.
Well, quote-unquote, bought it. We had to pay for it.
Yeah, a lot of the teachers just do programs that they find online or buy online, which I think is kind of counterproductive to some extent. Because, I mean, as a college professor, you're supposed to be sort of a master in your field. Sort of. I mean, my professor for the Intro to the Legal World of Business was actually a practicing law attorney for 30 years previously, before teaching. So that's pretty interesting.
Yes, they know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. And I'm guessing a good majority of your comp sci professors are probably kids who got a computer science major and then just teach it.
There's quite a few older professors that I think they've just been teaching for quite a long time, but for the stuff that they teach, you don't really need field experience. It's pretty much all theory, I guess. I mean, when it comes to coding, you just have to know how to do it. I mean, it helps for the engineering aspect if you're a software engineer, if maybe they've had an internship somewhere where they've been a software engineer, or they were a software engineer for a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
But I know there's one of our professors who can't be but maybe 5 or 6 years older than us, or he doesn't appear to be, and so I'm assuming he started teaching pretty much as soon as he left college, or maybe he had one job and then came back, was offered a job to teach.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's definitely a shortage of teachers, and it can be difficult finding the right one. My chemistry professor last year was pretty much fresh out of grad school, and he wasn't exactly comfortable with teaching the subject fully. He knew what he was doing, but I think that it takes a bit of time. I mean, you got to get better. You got to teach, and you'll be able to adapt more. I mean, I'm even surprised that a majority, if you're saying that your comp sci professors are older guys, that's kind of surprising to me, because I figured the whole scene of cyber, security and computer sciences and whatnot has changed quite a bit, over the past 30 years, 20 years.
I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some professors that are not the greatest at their job, but some of the better ones are the older ones, although I'd say some of my favorite have to be the younger ones, though. They tend to be better, but some stuff like programming in Java hasn't changed in the last 10 years. Or not really. Someone's going to fight me over that if they be like, well, there's differences between like Java 8 and Java 11. Okay, whatever. I know. I'm a comp sci major. I fucking know, okay? But the general idea behind it is the same.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like law. I mean, law really doesn't change much. I mean, law is law. I mean, you get into the theories of it, your different beliefs, because we were doing a bit of reading about the different school of studies for law, and they definitely make sense. The one that obviously kind of sticks out the most, it was the legal realists, and their whole belief was that, since life and society changes consistently and just all the time, that laws and doctrines, need to be adapted. They need to change. And then another one that I thought was very interesting was natural law. You get into law based on a universal moral order is kind of the general theme there. And then they talk about things like civil disobedience, where you should, disobey a immoral law. I mean, morality over unnatural law is kind of what they believe in. And so I was going to ask you, Jacob, would you describe yourself as a natural law school of study or a legal realist?
The natural law is the one where it's like civil disobedience is under natural law, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd definitely be more of a natural law kind of guy.
Mm-hmm. Another one, one of the other primary ones was legal positivism, which is more of sovereign command, where it talks about how law should come from recognized authority. So things like your kings, your president, your dictators, etc., etc. And I thought that one's kind of interesting because, I mean, you're throwing the word dictator out there, and it goes into, sovereign command. I mean, does a king or a president really know what's best for us? I mean, I'd like to think that I'm more of a natural law kind of guy, because, I mean, obviously, we need to have a set of morals to have a well-developed society. But the issue is, you get into what exactly is good or evil. I mean, you're seeing that now. I mean, hell, think about it. People just broke into the Capitol building. I mean, some people believe that's a form of civil disobedience, and that's good. And a lot of people believe that that isn't, because you're breaking into a federal building. It caused property damage. People got hurt. And you got half the nation thinking that something's good and half of it thinking it's something evil. The freedom of choice can almost be dire in some cases. Because I've talked to some people and they go, man, I'm not going to lie, I'm almost fully authoritarian. Some people do support full authoritarianism because they think that the masses, we talked about this the other day, the bewildered herd should not be able to emotionally make decisions for the nation, what's best. And that's kind of what we run on, here in America. You have people voting for people that they believe will represent them as best they could. Represent them, not represent, the other person.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand the authoritarian mindset. It makes sense, but at the same time, to me, it's more important that everyone have their freedom than trying to make sure that no one's messing it up for everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Because, in my opinion, if you give everyone the freedom, they can fix the issues that someone else may cause, rather than having to deal with an authoritarian government that usually ends up leading to oppression. So,
that's a really big issue, is that a lot of people believe that those with wealth and power are oppressing or exploiting those with less wealth to help maintain societal control through the law. And, that's why a lot of people have thought about, abolishing the Electoral College has been a recent conversation, because they feel like that doesn't really represent, the majority or those who are oppressed. They believe that's like a means of oppression.
Well, I think that was kind of a politically charged thing because of the previous election, the 2016 election. Now that certain things are different, I feel like that's not going to be a talking point anymore.
Yeah.
That's just my personal take. It seemed a little politically charged, not based on... I'm sure there were some people that were thinking based out of not in political camps talking about, but I think the majority of what started that was party politics.
Absolutely. I definitely think it was an emotional play. I mean, you had news sources playing to people's emotions like, this man that isn't our party got elected, and he didn't get elected by the majority vote. He got elected through the Electoral College, and after they counted all the numbers, it was the minority vote who won that. And so you had that massive struggle there where it's like, this is horseshit. You're telling me that the majority can't make the decisions? You're supposed to think the majority of people make the decisions.
The idea behind that is that the majority doesn't step on the minority, because, if it was, then the majority could always just do whatever they wanted. Just checks and balances is the whole idea behind the Electoral College and why it's a thing.
Mm-hmm. I think it definitely has its flaws, but I think it's a sort of fair system, because, when you look more or less at where a lot of the electoral votes come from, it obviously comes from densely populated suburban or urban areas, in the coasts, whether it's east or west coast. But a majority of your manufacturing and technological advances and all this, comes from the middle of the country, more or less the Midwest. That's a lot of land. A lot of the Electoral College has focused votes in such small areas, but you have such wide land covering the United States. And I guess, obviously, land doesn't vote. People do. When you look at population maps, there's such a massive difference in comparison, Missouri to California.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of... a lot of it's still kind of the same arguments that we've been having since the founding of the country. You've still got federalism versus anti-federalism. You've still got urban versus rural, which is better for the country.
Mm-hmm. There's a massive difference in moral beliefs, obviously, in urban coastal cities compared to Midwest states. Obviously, one of the biggest is being abortion. That is absolutely huge. And then you get into free health care and all these other things. I think that I wish that we could find some common ground eventually, like as Americans, but we're an extremely, extremely diverse country. There's a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds. And you can't exactly appeal to everyone. That's completely obvious. So it's good that we're able to adapt laws and such that a good majority of the people believe are best for the country, but obviously you get a good handful of people here and there who don't exactly believe it. If we had national, funding for abortion as a right, then obviously you've essentially pissed off the entire right-wing side of the nation, because they believe that's wrong at a certain date. And so it's hard to find common ground and what's best. That's why I've been talking about how we need more state power. States need to have more power to make their own legislations, in my mind.
Right. Well, and the worst part about it is the power that they do have now, the federal government can still override it in a way, because there's states that have legalized cannabis and other, I think Oregon, they did magic mushrooms for treatment of certain illnesses. But at the federal level, it's still illegal. So I know that if you hold a medical marijuana card or a medical cannabis card, you are ineligible for federal aid. If you're a college student, or just in general, you're ineligible for federal aid if you hold a medical marijuana card, because that's their way of enforcing it, I guess, which is bullshit.
Yeah. It's definitely weird having someone go from one state where something is acceptable to another where it isn't. I mean, you get into that problem a lot with guns, especially. Missouri compared to Illinois is an absolute massive
Not even
difference.
just guns, just weapons in general.
I've sort of I've mentioned this before about splitting America into sort of commonwealths. So groups of states with similar ideologies, but you definitely get into the issue of possible little skirmishes / wars and massive conflicts. And I think that obviously the federal government keeps us in check, and that means, because it's hard to keep 300 plus million people in order, keep them orderly, and keep them all under the same laws and statutes and legislations that make the country go round, make things work. But I think that if we were to split states into similar ideologies, I almost feel like people would be a lot happier. Because a lot of the time people are like, oh, you have your right wing saying, oh, those damn, socialist, commie-loving baby killers are trying to take my taxpayer money to fund abortions, which I don't believe in. And then you have the left oh, you got all these redneck hippies, passing these tax cuts for major corporations, which help, them build more wealth instead of allegedly, it's supposed to be distributed back into communities through taxation. I think that would be pretty interesting. How do you feel about a Commonwealth system?
That'd be interesting. I think some states used to refer to themselves as commonwealths before they were states too.
I think it was Maryland?
Massachusetts. I might be wrong.
I think you're right.
Massachusetts used to be called the Commonwealth of Massachusetts before we became the U.S.
I always look back to the Fallout games and their sort of Commonwealth style. So you can pull up a map, and there's roughly, let's see here. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 Commonwealths, roughly. Or no, 13. Sorry. And so Texas is really its own thing, and it also has Arizona tacked on there as well. Then you have the Gulf Commonwealth, which has, Louisiana, Florida, Georgia, those grouped in there. Then you have the Plains Commonwealth, which would be Missouri, Iowa, appears to be, I think Illinois is in there, and Oklahoma as well. And then obviously you have Northwest Commonwealth, which is Washington up there in the left corner in those states. Then you have New England, which is New York and those in the top right. So, obviously when I look at this map, I like to think that I look into ideologies and beliefs of a good majority of the people in these commonwealths. And for example, the Plains Commonwealth, you have a lot of, I'll say, simple folk, farmers, a lot of country land, a lot of farmland, and a good majority of them tend to say the same. because I think these are a lot heavily influenced on what states have voted, for. So, a lot of conservative states in a surrounding area would group up. A lot of liberal states would group up and form their own Commonwealth. And, a lot of them would have their own beliefs. Obviously there would definitely be less anti-gun laws in these more Republican-focused Commonwealths, and then you'd have probably a few more tax legislations in things like the liberal Commonwealth. But as I said, you'd probably get into the problem of unrest and possible skirmishes between the two. What if someone wants to go visit a different one?
And that kind of reminds me, because doesn't Canada have something like that? Because they've got their, I think they have two different ways that their areas are grouped up, right? They've got the.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm not sure. I know it's actually with the British Commonwealth.
Because there's provinces. I know there's provinces, and then I think there's another thing. There's provinces, which maybe I'm wrong, but I thought there was two separate groups of.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, there's provinces and then there's territories. Although maybe the territories are something different entirely.
Yeah, I think you're definitely focused.
Okay, no, I'm wrong. So they have provinces, which are like our states, and they have territories like us.
Yeah.
But I could see something like that working. We just have to lay it out correctly.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm looking here at the British Commonwealths. So you have England and Scotland and Wales and I believe Ireland. No, Ireland's not part of that. And it appears to be Australia. And there's a lot of other countries that are a part of this. And a lot of these countries, hold extremely similar ideas. And I believe they have a good majority of similar laws and immigration policies and things like that there. So, England does it, but they're, the United Kingdoms is on a very small piece of land in the middle, in the ocean. And having that ability to spread out into Australia and a few other Middle Eastern, actually no, it's African countries. There's a few African countries in there that are part of it as well. So that's actually pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think South Africa might be part of it.
Mm-hmm. I'd say that's pretty interesting. And having Canada a part of that as well. As I said, they all hold similar ideas. America is a pretty big, continent. North America is pretty big. So.
Well, if you consider most of our states are the size of a lot of countries around the world.
Mm-hmm. And that's another thing too. Whenever I said that there's so many different cultures and life experiences, America is huge. Not, as I said, not everyone has the exact same experience. Someone in New York has lived a vastly different life than someone in a small hick town in the middle of the Midwest. Those are two completely different areas. And so I think that if we did group states up into commonwealths, there would be a bit more of the same kind of ideologies and sort of work ethic and mindset there when it comes to making legislations and things like that. And then I guess the federal government, to some extent, would have the ability to work more on foreign affairs, I think. Because I think that the federal government should focus more on foreign affairs and foreign policies and really just keeping us connected with the world. Because obviously having 50 different states trying to make their own foreign policies and communications and things like that wouldn't work. And I think if we had a Commonwealth system, we could abolish the presidency. Abolish the presidency, because there's no reason that one man can or should be able to be the head figure of 50 states and an entire country of 300 plus million people.
So you're thinking more of there'd be a leader for each Commonwealth?
Kind of. That's what.
Or a system. So you would still have your state systems, But then, like, a lot of the infrastructure that's on the federal government would then be split up into the different commonwealths.
I think that for the Commonwealths, we still have senators and representatives that would work together on foreign policies with the federal government and things like an army. So there would be a more focus there on keeping us connected internationally and between states. So instead of the Senate, working on making laws and passing legislations and things like that control an entire nation, it would be more focused on keeping us connected with the rest of the world and passing laws there. And then your senates and your commonwealths would focus on making legislations, closer to home. People with a lot of similar ideologies. I think that would...
Yeah, that makes sense, because that's kind of closer to what we were supposed to have. I mean, we have way more states than we originally did. And so, I mean, like, I'm sure the system was designed to scale to an extent, but we're in a much larger area. We're much more diverse than we were 200 years ago, when they were only dealing with, a handful of states.
Yeah, it definitely goes back to what I mentioned earlier with, like, legal realists talking about how life in society, keeps changing, and so we need to have laws and things like that and doctrines that can be altered for these changes. I mean, they drafted the Constitution in a completely different environment than what we have now. And a good majority of those, those rights, those amendments still hold up to this day, but we've had to do some revisions, and we've obviously added a lot of them. And so I think that if we had the Commonwealth system, things would be more focused on the current environment for a much smaller group of people. Because it's hard to control, as I said, 300 plus million people and trying to keep them all happy and represented well. So I don't think it's a terrible idea. The issue is how do you get people to transition to a Commonwealth system? It's just like, I guess we're just done now with this whole 50 states. Good luck. Just merge together. It would be a long and strenuous process. I mean, Texas has already talked about leaving, the 50 states. They've talked about leaving. So it's very possible. Is there some law or something keeping states from leaving? I think there is, right?
The last time they tried, there was a civil war.
Well, that's a completely different thing, I think. But
I mean, yeah, to be fair, it was different issues, different time. But I think that's still, like, the main idea is if you don't think the federal government's going to just allow a state to just be like, yeah, we're leaving.
Yeah, it says...
Although, like you said, I do think there might be something in there saying that they're allowed to. I don't know.
I'm looking here. It's about secession in the United States. It said in Texas versus White in 1869, the Supreme Court ruled unilateral secession unconstitutional, while commenting that revolution or consent of the states could lead to a successful secession. So, it would either take a revolution or a consent of a majority of the states.
Okay.
So it would be a vote. It would be a vote for, as I said, similar states would definitely, vote yes to leave with other states and, like, merge. I wonder if there's a law against, like, states merging. I wonder if that's a thing that's possible. For states to merge. Well, there's apparently a list of proposed state mergers, but obviously none of them have gone through.
Wait, that's a thing that's been, like, I want to hear some of these.
Yeah. I think since the establishment of the United States, numerous state partition proposals have been put forward that would partition an existing state in order that a particular region within might either join another state or create a new state. Oh, so this is more or less like towns, like, towns leaving, like a region, like leaving that state and joining another. So Article 4, Section 3, Clause 1 of the United States Constitution, often called the New States Clause, grants to the United States Congress the authority to admit new states into the United States beyond the 13 already in existence at the time the Constitution went into effect. It also includes a stipulation originally designed to give eastern states that still had western land claims a veto over whether which western counties could become states. So it's definitely out of date, and I'm not really seeing anything like recent about any sort of merger or possibly leaving. So this hasn't been mentioned in a long time, it seems. There's obviously no recent plan for states to leave, other than Texas, I believe, which did try and leave, or has the ability to. It reads here, current Supreme Court precedent in Texas v. White holds that states cannot secede from the Union by an act of the state. More recently, Supreme Court Justice Antoine Scalia stated, if there is any constitutional issue resolved by the Civil War, it is that there is no right to secede. And this is during the attempt for Texas to secede. But I definitely...
Yeah, and that's what I thought, is there was a precedent set by the Civil War that makes it to basically where states can't secede.
Yeah, so it's like an unspoken rule. But Texas has tried, and I wouldn't be surprised if they tried again. All right, Jacob, anything you want to tell the viewers before we sign out?
Have fun at school.
Some wise words there. All right. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you tune in to the next episode.